Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Pauline Carr and I'm the Chancellor of the University of South Australia. I'm delighted to be here today and I wish you all a very warm welcome. I would like to acknowledge that today we're meeting on Kaurna land and we pay respects to the Kaurna people, their living culture and the unique role they continue to play in the life of the Adelaide region. UniSA has a very long-standing relationship with CEDA and we recognise CEDA's important role in advancing debate on economic development over many decades. UniSA, and in particular the university's business school, has worked closely with CEDA for more than a decade, examining issues at the cutting edge of business, development and economic growth. We have worked with the CEDA leadership and membership to draw attention to critical issues in the economy, such as gender equality in the workplace, reconciliation, and the need to address climate change, as well as sustainability as being integral to good business. We're very proud of our relationship with CEDA and we will continue to work closely with them into the future. We are also working quite closely with today's keynote speaker, South Australia's Premier Peter Malinauskas. Today, Premier Malinauskas will deliver a State of the State address, providing an update on progress from his first 12 months in office and outlining his economic and priority policies for the year ahead. Premier Malinauskas was elected on a platform that included some significant reforms. Among them was a promise to look at changes to the state's higher education sector. And that's a promise he has kept. And now he has us up very late at night doing lots of homework as we explore, in conjunction with the University of Adelaide, a business case for the formation of a new university for the future of South Australia. That's certainly one issue that's very close to UniSA, but a lot else has happened in our state over the past year. So it's my very great pleasure to now invite Premier Malinauskas to the stage to tell us more. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Pauline, for your warm introduction. Can I acknowledge CEDA, Christine, Pauline and everybody else for your leadership in this state, and very much appreciate the opportunity to be able to use this platform to talk about some important remarks in respect to the state's future. Can I acknowledge my large number of parliamentary colleagues that are here this afternoon, particularly members of the Cabinet. Can I thank Cliffy for his welcome to country. I too acknowledge that we get together today on the lands of the Kaurna people, and I pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging. On Sunday, on the steps of Parliament House, something special happened. We've got a pretty amazing track record and history as a state. We've done a lot of things first. We've delivered some very substantial reforms that have been adopted around the country, sometimes even around the world. We think of democratic reform being the first place anywhere in the world to give women the right to vote and to run for Parliament. Economic reforms, think about the way Torrens title completely transformed the way we think about property, the most important of asset classes across generations. And social reform, the first place to decriminalise homosexuality in the nation. On Sunday, inside Parliament House, before the official ceremony and proceedings begun, I had the opportunity to speak to a group of Aboriginal elders, and I was particularly struck and moved at the opportunity to be able to speak to older Aboriginal women who could not contain their emotions. Sincere, heartfelt, overwhelming joy was their experience at the prospect of being genuinely included at the centre of decision-making in a way that affects their lives. On Sunday, we did something that was truly special in a way that accords with our state's best traditions, doing special things at important moments. And I think that's something we can all be very, very proud of as the rest of the nation approaches the referendum later this year. In that context, the opportunity today to be able to give a State of the State address in both unprecedented and exciting times is something that I'm very grateful for. How is it unprecedented? Well, I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but what I can assert without qualification is that never before has a CEDA State of the State address been given in South Australia in the circumstances that we enjoy today. Arguably, our state has never been in a stronger economic position. As I stand here, we have the lowest unemployment rate in South Australia's history. Not the equal lowest, not the lowest this decade, the lowest that has ever been recorded for as long as records have been kept. We have more people employed in full-time work critically than at any other point in our history. Our youth unemployment rate is the best it's been in 33 years, and we've achieved all of this while maintaining a historically high participation rate. The robust economic health is also reflected in a broad cross-section of independent economic surveys. The most recent CommSec State of the State report moved us up in the rankings to third around the country. NAB's most recent quarterly business survey said that South Australia was the only state that has showed continuous improvement in conditions across recent statistics. And the ANZ Statometer shows that at the same time there was a sharp de-acceleration in the eastern states in respect to economic activity. Here in South Australia, quote, we've remained broadly steady. Our population is rising. Last week, the ABS released stats showing that South Australia had our second biggest population increase on record. We had the highest level of overseas migration coming to our state in our history, the highest. So, of course, this strong economic position is worthy of recognition, even celebration. These are the sorts of numbers that could provide more than enough content for an avalanche of press releases from myself, the Deputy Premier, the Treasurer, a range of ministers. Gives us enough to work with to power it in press conference after press conference, and we probably will. But doing that alone would risk a great disservice to a historic opportunity. Now is not the time to recoil from making decisions. Now is not the time for investment inertia or policy paralysis. Instead, now must be a time for ambition. I say that for two reasons. One, history tells us that at some point global economic conditions will change. Many are predicting that will happen sooner rather than later. So this alone demands structural economic reform to ensure that our economy continues to become far more diverse and resilient so as to withstand any future headwinds or change in terrain. The second is because, as I have said before on more than one occasion, including in forums not too dissimilar to this, there are currently two great global forces at play that pertain directly to South Australians' economic future. The first is global insecurity. For almost every single person in this room, it is the first time in our lifetimes that there is war in continental Europe. a full-scale conventional invasion from one sovereign nation into another. At the same time, we are experiencing the single biggest military build-up since World War II, and it's happening in our region. And it's not being undertaken by a Western liberal democracy. This necessarily means that Western liberal democracies respond, which means there will be, and there already is, a lot more being invested into industries such as defence, space and cyber. Only one jurisdiction in this Commonwealth is already at the front of the queue to capture that opportunity. It's ours. The second great challenge, of course, is climate. Now, last week, the IPCC from the UN released another report, its most substantial report in a couple of years. And for those of us who actually care about the planet that we are currently the custodians of, we are running out of time quickly. Achieving Paris, the 1.5 degree target, which is a critical threshold, the window to achieve those objectives is closing quickly. And what we are starting to see is rapid response around the world. Even here, finally, we learn news in the last 48 hours that the federal parliament is set to pass a piece of legislation that sees Australia actually take real steps to decarbonise, following the rest of the world globally. The Inflation Reduction Act is having an impact in the US. Europe is already well advanced, but most substantially, global capital is on the march, investing in jurisdictions that are at the front of the decarbonisation queue. Now, which jurisdiction in our federation is the most further advanced in the decarbonisation effort, having achieved already a total of 70% of all our electricity consumed coming from renewable energy? It's South Australia. So, the world's two big global challenges, South Australia's unprecedented economic opportunities. So today, I release our economic statement. This is a high-level document by its nature. Its scope is broad, but it makes clear a sense of principles, parameters and priorities which will guide government's deliberations. Top line, if our economy is to capitalise on the moment, our state must be smart. It must be sustainable, and I firmly believe it must be inclusive. Because when swathes of people are locked out of prosperity, no economy can truly prosper. Smart. If we don't become a lot smarter, quick smart, we're in Barney Rubble trouble. Because South Australia has just signed up to making the most complex machines ever built in the history of humankind. I have struggled in the last week or two to find a set of words that can encapsulate in the minds of South Australians the size of the opportunity and the challenge and the scale of the enterprise that we must now embark upon. I was in the UK not too long after the AUKUS announcement, and we landed and we went straight to Barrow in northwest UK, where they build nuclear submarines, and they've been doing it for 60-odd years. Now, in these jobs, one of the beautiful privileges is that you get to see some amazing things. And I thought, I'm going to see something pretty amazing. And so we get taken into the town, which is ostensibly built up in and around the submarine manufacturing facility. And we're taken into a range of different buildings and so forth. But there are two particularly massive buildings. We went into the first of them, and it is huge. Like, this is small beer in here, small beer. And we get taken up story after story after story up to the top, and you work out you're going to walk out and look down to the manufacturing site. We came out and walked down. I thought, oh, this would be cool. And I walked out, and it was impossible not to be taken back by the sheer scale and size of what was happening. These machines are massive. And we were looking down on them, and you could see these, what looked like little high-vis ants running around on the floor, crawling over these bloody monstrosity of machines. And then we walked out of there, and then we walked into room after room that were huge in their own scale, full of kids on computers. Well, kids, but people on computers, plugging away on things that I couldn't begin to possibly understand. It's impossible to describe. And then we got taken through the academy. Now, the factory employs 11,000 people. That's about 8 times bigger than Holden was when it closed down. 11,000 people. And we're taken through the academy, which has 2,000 people who are acquiring a skill at any one point within it. 2,000. They take something like 300 to 500 new kids in every year just to keep the workforce churning. And we walk into one room, and there's someone getting taught, steel fabrication. Then it's pipe welding. Then it's software engineering. Then it's project management. And each one of those skills is required to be at a specific nuclear standard. You cannot change a light bulb on a nuclear submarine without it being at a nuclear standard. The complexity of the undertaking is extraordinary. The workforce development requirements are unprecedented. The qualifications aren't trades. They are degree qualified tradespeople. The requirement to get smarter is more acute than anyone could possibly understand. That is why we've got started. It's why we're building the technical colleges. It's why I've negotiated for hundreds of additional Commonwealth-supported university places. It's why we're creating a new university of the future. It's why we're introducing 3-year-old preschool. It's also why today I announce our statewide innovation model, a model that seeks to ensure that our innovation precincts, while retaining areas of speciality, are strategically connected so that knowledge is shared, skills are developed in the areas of most critical need. Whether it be Lot 14, Biomed City, Tonsley, whether it be the Defence Precinct at Edinburgh or Osborne, or all of it requires a greater degree of collaboration and coordination in the areas of space, cyber, AI, quantum computing, advanced manufacturing. Bringing this together will contribute to us being the smartest state we can be. But AUKUS, notwithstanding its scale and the energy within government to address it, AUKUS, in the context of the media cycle these days, is last week's news. Today, under the auspice of the economic statement, I outline a roadmap for the reindustrialisation of our state through decarbonisation. I submit to you today the consequential state development decisions before us and the timelines I'm placing around those decisions. In the late 1930s, there was a company. The company had an unpromising sounding name, Broken Hill Proprietary Company. It was maturing from a burgeoning startup to becoming an adolescent bull with expansionist ambitions. They'd just discovered iron ore at Iron Knob in Eyre Peninsula. And they were working in the late 30s with the state government of the time on the building of an unprecedented Australian blast furnace. They wanted to make tin plate. But there was a problem. They needed water. So BHP and Tom Playford sat down and they cut a deal. Playford would get BHP their water and BHP would build the tin plate plant. But then World War II broke out and Playford saw an opportunity to renegotiate the deal. He sat BHP down and he got them to agree to a plan that instead of making tin, they were going to make steel, and then they were going to use the steel to build warships. But to get the water they needed, Playford had to commit to building a pipeline, a big pipeline, stretching 350 kilometres plus, which he built from Morgan to Whyalla. At the time, this was characterised as bold, ambitious and extremely risky, but it paid off. And to this day, the Whyalla Steelworks uses the same water from over 300 kilometres away. This decision transformed the Upper Spencer Gulf into the state's industrial powerhouse. Today, that Whyalla-Morgan pipeline is a little-known piece of infrastructure that's almost a century old, but it serves as an example of how bold policy combined with thoughtful planning can produce economic opportunity that spans decades. Hydrogen is another such opportunity. There are two big efforts underway within your government. The first, I desperately hope you are familiar with. The second, you are most likely not. The first is the state government's hydrogen jobs plan. We are building the world's largest hydrogen electrolyser and power plant. We are going to take water and turn it into hydrogen, green hydrogen, at a scale that hasn't been seen anywhere around the world, and then use it to produce energy back into the market. This is a big, risky policy. It is technically difficult, but we are putting our stake in the ground, not just nationally, but internationally, that South Australia is the place to play when it comes to hydrogen. The second opportunity is regarding a piece of legislation, the world's first Hydrogen Act. The Department of Energy and Mining, Hydrogen Power SSA, Minister Koutsantonis and Minister Ma have been working exceptionally hard, in particular, engaging with Indigenous communities, engaging with industry to develop a piece of legislation that we will introduce into the Parliament before the midwinter break. Cabinet signed off on it only on Monday. That legislation, bear with me here, that legislation will regulate hydrogen in all of its forms, but critically, it is going to provide a framework for international investment houses and other big players like Fortescue Future Industries, owned by Twiggy Forrest, amongst others, to be able to participate in grabbing land. We have swathes, in particular of pastoral land in South Australia, that have on it the most high-quality coincident wind and solar resources anywhere in the world, that give us an opportunity not to produce megawatts worth of hydrogen production, but gigawatt scale size industrial production of hydrogen. They need the land, they need the sun, and they need the wind. But in order to be able to invest what will be billions, they need a platform and a framework to do that. Our Hydrogen Act, should it pass the Parliament, will provide that with the view of going to the market sooner rather than later. Oak Dam. Oak Dam, not to be confused with Olympic Dam, is a BHP-owned resource which, from its initial exploratory drilling, has demonstrated the potential to be a very high-quality copper deposit. Today, in the Tiser, the state government announced approval for up to 14 drilling rigs, more than double the current number. BHP is getting serious about Oak Dam. So is the state government, but there's a little way to go. Olympic Dam, not to be confused with Oak Dam, is one of the world's largest copper deposits. So between Olympic Dam, Carrapateena and Oak Dam, South Australia may yet be home to the best economic resource of copper globally. Copper is the most critical mineral of all critical minerals to the global decarbonisation effort. Without copper, and a lot more of it, there is no decarbonisation effort. Allow me to illustrate this with just one example. Average family car with a combustion engine uses 19 kilos of copper. For a typical battery electric vehicle, 83 kilos. 4 times as much copper, and that's just cars. BHP is not spending $9.6 billion at a 40% price premium to take over Oz Minerals for no reason. Copper is becoming a very big deal. You could even say that South Australia's copper is set to become a gold mine. I've got 3 kids, I'm entitled to dad jokes. But what we don't want to see is just digging the ore out of the ground and sent overseas. We want to move up that value chain and process as much as we can right here in South Australia. That means even bigger investments from BHP, but it also means BHP needs something else from South Australia beyond the copper deposit. They need water. They need a lot more water. The Great Artesian Basin is not an unlimited supply, and there are serious ECG questions for BHP and the government around the utilisation of this precious finite resource, which means an alternative water source must be found, and it has to be found quickly. But the good news for you, BHP, is that there's another key commodity that the world cannot decarbonise without, and we've got big plans for it here in South Australia. But it also needs water to be produced, and that, of course, is hydrogen. Now, the state government has got the water that we require for the hydrogen jobs plan, but we're going to need an awful lot more water if we're going to unlock the gigawatt scale production that I referred to earlier. Which takes us right back to old mate Tom Playford, the visionary, and the Morgan-Whyalla pipeline. To achieve the massive reindustrialisation opportunity through decarbonisation, South Australian industry and government has got some big decisions to make. Early in the life of this government, largely behind closed doors, we made a decision to accelerate efforts and increase the resources around the development of a business case into the Northern Water Project. The Northern Water Project is a proposal to build a massive multi-billion-dollar desalinisation plant to produce industrial-scale volumes of water aimed at unlocking the critical mineral and hydrogen opportunity in our state. Not dissimilar to the Morgan-Whyalla pipeline, it's big, it's bold and it's risky, which is why partnership is essential and methodical, detailed analysis is a non-negotiable. Now, BHP. There's a gentleman in the room who I had the chance to say g'day to just a moment ago, Mr. Edgar Bastow. He's the Chief Operating Officer of BHP globally, President of some very significant resources within BHP. Now Edgar, he's over there somewhere, Edgar, there we go. BHP. I'm a relatively new Premier. I've approached our burgeoning partnership with excitement. I'm filled with a bit of nervousness, that new relationship energy. But BHP, I've been watching. I've seen you flirt with premiers before. I've seen you go steady. I've even seen you engaged. But I've also seen you leave other premiers at the altar, more than one. So I say to BHP now, I'm excited. I'm interested. I'm attracted to that twinkle in your eye. But I want a prenup. In the next week, I expect to receive the final business case from Infrastructure South Australia on the Northern Water project. Early indications are that Northern Water could unlock thousands of additional jobs and substantially grow gross state product each year. Early indications are that billions of dollars in additional mining royalties to the South Australian government could be realised over the next 2 decades, just from the copper expansion opportunity. If the business case confirms all of this, active consideration must be applied to progressing this project to the next stage, which is an environmental impact statement ahead of any potential FID. Now, BHP and the state government both know that the EIS process alone for a project of this scale is going to cost over $200 million just for the EIS. Today, I am willing to commit the government to the active consideration of the EIS, but I make clear that this can't be all on the government, and our prenup will mean that BHP will have to wear a lot of the risk. I believe in the decarbonisation opportunity as much as BHP does, but for the benefit of BHP shareholders and for the people of our state, we must do 3 things as we go on this journey. Manage expectations, be methodical in all planning, environmental planning, financial planning and strategic planning, and we must work to hard timelines. I'll explain why that third point matters. We've got a lot of opportunities in the state at the moment, and if the Northern Water project does not stack up, so be it. But an endless, protracted deliberation does have an opportunity cost. The effort and energy put into preparing this project could have been spent elsewhere. So today, I stipulate a Northern Water decision-making timeline. If we're going to go into EIS, we must have contractual agreement on that no later than July this year. The EIS, if proceeded with, needs to be concluded by spring next year, and if we get this far, FID needs to be achieved in the summer of 24-25, no later. So on receipt of the final business case, my team will be ready to analyse its outcomes concurrently with BHP's starting next week. While we're setting timelines, a few others. The hydrogen jobs plan, the procurement closed on the 14th of March. The government will be making decisions come hell or high water by the end of July which path we decide to go down, with contracts to be signed and construction to commence by the end of this year. In respect to our other decarbonisation dance partner, GFG. In a dream world, BHP is mining and processing a lot more copper, active hydrogen production is underway, and GFG is investing in the steelworks for green metal production, perhaps even using our hydrogen. My government stands ready to work with GFG, but rubber needs to start hitting the road from them. In terms of skills, in the coming months, the Technical College at Port Augusta will be signed and sealed with delivery by 2026. And on top of that, I announced 2 new policies here today. In order to guide the extraordinary reindustrialisation effort and apply the economic statement, my government will be re-establishing the Economic Development Board, which will operate within clear parameters. I will be announcing the Economic Development Board and who is on it by July this year. Second, on Monday in Cabinet, we approved the creation of a new piece of legislation to establish a brand new Coordinator General with substantial powers, not to overrule existing regulation, but to expedite dramatically decisions made within existing regulatory parameters. We have a massive program of work, and I want the legislative power and framework to ensure decisions are made. because I and the government have a sense of urgency. It is so easy excuse me, for timelines to drag, not through deliberate malaise, but through misguided good intent. The state's moment is now. 2030 will be here before we know it, and I'm not going to die wondering. My government was elected with a broad policy agenda. It is absolutely true that returning the health system to a better state of play is a key priority of my government. It occupies an extraordinary amount of effort, energy and government's resource to address that issue. But the hydrogen program and the decarbonisation opportunity are central to this government's platform. Young people rightly demand it of us. Health is a problem that needs to be fixed, but the decarbonisation opportunity and program can change the course of the state. There will be challenges along the way, but if we achieve all of this, between AUKUS, the opportunities in space and cyber, hydrogen, critical minerals, decarbonisation of industry, South Australia will be a very different place in 10 years' time to what it is today. We'll be smarter, we'll be more sustainable, and more people will be included in an increasingly more prosperous middle class, enjoying a better standard of living than the one we enjoy today. We will truly hand over the state to the next generation of South Australians in a way that every parent desires. We just have to keep doing the important things at the important moments. And no moment is more important than the decade we have in front of us. Thank you for your time.
Premier,
Brenton.
thank you very much for that. Sitting here today, probably haven't seen the runway of opportunity that we have for jobs, for those that are prepared to work hard, than certainly in my lifetime. For the audience today, this is your opportunity to ask something of the Premier. You don't get to do this very often. It's anything you like, and I'm basically your vessel for this, so the Premier's promised to not shoot the messenger. We will favour probably questions from the audience, so please try to catch one of the CEDA people nearby and they'll hold up a green thing to get our attention. But there's also, while that's the old school manner, there's probably the modern manner as well, where if you have your phone on your table, there's a QR code. There's people that have been sending some questions in. I want some better questions, please. You can also vote on those questions that have been put up, and it's probably incumbent on me to read some of those out with the most votes. Lee Sales wasn't available. You've got me, and just while those questions come through, I'll probably touch on an area I know is close to your heart, but you haven't spoken about yet today. It relates to the broader tourism economy events. City vibrancy is really important, particularly to attract people to be here and stay here for all these jobs that you've got coming our way. We've just been Festival Fringe, WOMAD, we're about to have Gather Round, Live. What next?
Look, I didn't mention any of this in the speech. I mean, it's been an important part of our economic agenda. So today I wanted to talk about new things, and there's a lot that we're aiming to achieve. But on events, the genesis of that policy was COVID. I mean, it's lost on us, really. But if you work in the hospital system, it's not lost on you, let me tell you. But for most people outside of the health realm, the pandemic feels like a long time ago in terms of our lived experience. But this time, 12 months ago, there were a lot of restrictions in place still. The restrictions didn't come off entirely, really start motoring away until about after Easter last year. So we said we want hospitality to get back on its feet. We saw events as being a way that government could influence that. We can't make people go to a restaurant, but we can bring activity. But more than that, Brenton, we were really aggressive about shooting for some events, ones that people said we wouldn't be able to get, because people come here, they see us, and they feel something's happening to the joint. And then they go home and they tell people about it, and that is worth its weight in gold. It's not just about a good time, as much as I hope all these things do provide a good time. It's about the state projecting who we are at the moment. It's about the state projecting the fact that we are proud of the story that we've got to tell. We've got a unique offering, and that's worth spreading the word about. We can't hide our light under the bushel, and events help tell that story. And look, I would rather be on the Today Show boring the bejesus out of breakfast TV viewers talking to them about hydrogen. But the truth is they're not really up for that, and I've tried. They want to talk about the bloody V8s and Gather Round and Live Golf and the Fringe and the Festival, which is not a bad thing, right? So if it puts us on the national stage, I say all power to it and more of that.
Will it help us bring people here and stay, have people stick here for all of those jobs you've got? I mean, as you said, you saw that factory up in Barrow. There are a lot of roles that we need to fill.
I'm worried about the workforce. It's the single biggest risk to the project. You know, some of the media commentary around AUKUS was, oh, look, timelines, it's never going to happen, it's more, you know, it's way off into the future. Any person that knows anything about nuclear submarines looks at the timeline and realises how ambitious it is. They've been doing this for 60 years in the US and the UK. The US gave the UK their technology in 1958. And they've been working on it ever since to get to the point they are today, and they're behind their production timelines. They have workforce shortages. So if that's their position with 60 years of knowledge and experience, we're trying to do this in 10 years. So what keeps me awake at night about the AUKUS program, Brennan, is the workforce development. We've got an extraordinary amount that we have to do, and we've got to do it quickly. We are going to need a lot more people here, and that brings with it its own pressures. People talk about the traffic on Victoria Road on the Lefevre Peninsula. That's nothing. We need a lot more homes. It's also why we announced our housing package a couple of weeks ago that include the biggest land release in the state's history.
This leads to a few of the questions coming through, and one of them relates to where does that workforce come from, and how you speak about inclusion. How do we get some of South Australia's most disadvantaged people into that workforce versus how do you perhaps inject some of the skills resources from overseas or interstate?
So South Australia does have a disproportionately larger number of people in the community who are, trying to get the words right here, who are economically disadvantaged and done so through intergenerational means. We have a greater portion of our population than other jurisdictions. It's us, Tasmania, and then pockets of Queensland. We are actively turning our minds to a few different programs that can be piloted, specifically aiming at particular geographical cohorts to get people engaged in terms of skills. But the simple fact is this: work is the key. Social programs are essential, but work is important, not because of the income it provides, but because of the dignity it affords people. And we've got more work than we know what to do with at the moment, but we've got to get people who are structurally unemployed into the labour market to participate, and then with some skills to get a job. Now, the best chance of us doing that, we know, is getting to children young. It's all about giving kids who are socially disadvantaged an opportunity to be able to participate into the future, and that's why we are unapologetic about our 3-year-old preschool program being deliberately orientated towards low socioeconomic communities. I think that's probably an unsurprising approach for a Labor government, to be frank, but it's something that the Royal Commission is actively working on as we speak, and we get that report from former Prime Minister Gillard in a few months' time, which we keenly anticipate. But I don't want to mislead people by saying AUKUS is going to make sure that every socially disadvantaged family is now going to have their life turned around. That's naive at best. But if we get to young people early enough, get them on a trajectory of being educated or at least completing school, they have a red-hot chance of graduating into the workforce and experiencing all the work that dignity all the dignity that work can provide, which is the life change.
We missed out on that early childhood education. I think the kids of the future will be a lot smarter than us. But
that's the plan.
I'm looking at the number one Loaded question here, and you touched on it before, Premier, around affordable housing, and I think there's certainly at least 30 people in this room that want to know a little bit more. We're getting all of this economic activity and jobs, and how are we going to make sure that they can be housed affordably?
Yeah, so look, the simple answer is we need a lot more supply, and that's not revolutionary. So what we turned our minds to is what can the government do to address this? So we had the state budget last year, we handed it down early, and then the Treasurer, Stephen Mulligan, got together with Minister Cook and Minister Champion and put together along with Minister Michaels, and said, right, we're going to come up with a substantial housing package, and I said we're going to have it done by the end of last year. We announced it in February. And we are pulling every lever we bloody can that we can find, and if people have got ideas of levers that we have not yet pulled, then let the Treasurer know. To try and change this, but it takes time, like everything. Excuse me. The biggest land release in the history of the state, a dramatic investment in public housing, which is actually important. For 29 of the last 30 years in South Australia, across successive governments, Labor and Liberal, for 29 of the last 30 years, South Australia has been selling off public housing stock. Remember the origins of the South Australian Housing Trust, not a social policy, it was play for developing workers' accommodation as an economic policy. He would roll over in his grave that for 29 of the last 30 years we've been selling stock off. It's madness. So we've reversed the savings that are imposed on Housing SA, and now they're building 1,100 homes over and above in net terms, 1,100 extra homes in net terms. It's the biggest turnaround in SA housing policy in 30 years. Planning reform, I mentioned land release, public housing, rental reform, and we're actively turning our minds to other arrangements the state government can invest in to expedite the pipeline of activity. I believe we've got to give the market choice. We shouldn't just be focusing on urban infill, although that's got a role to play, but we should actually be accommodating urban expansion, which is too often characterised as urban sprawl, and then make the investment decisions around it, around infrastructure, which we've set a new unit up to explicitly look at in those areas around land release.
Now, anyone from the floor? I can't see any green hands. So hopefully you can hear me all now. I have a loud voice, but not that loud. We do have a question from the floor. Is that all right if we give the mic back there?
Hello. G'day, Paul Kitching from Fuller Brand Communication, and thank you so much for everything that you've shared today. Very excited about hydrogen. From a branding perspective, will we become, I don't know, the hydrogen state? Is there a danger that someone else is going to steal that? The hydrogen festival state? I don't know.
I haven't turned my mind to that, to be honest. Look, the state's got a lot going for it, and we have to have the courage to maintain a degree of diversity in our economy without being a one-trick pony. I think the best thing we can do to establish our position nationally and globally around hydrogen is just to get a few things done. Hydrogen is such a new field that first mover advantage is captured by people who can actually point to things that have happened. And that's what we're working on with a really tight timeline in the space of 4 years around the hydrogen and jobs plan and that new facility which will be located in Whyalla. In terms of a branding exercise, the problem, if I said today, well, I hereby declare we're the hydrogen state, it'll take about 5 minutes before my phone will explode from the wine industry, or you insert industry name here that I haven't included. So I think we've got to have the courage to be diverse, but we have released a new campaign that we're running advertisements on interstate, which is all about attracting people, and it's had an extraordinary degree of success. New State of Mind is the name of the campaign. If you haven't seen the ad, it's worth looking at. It's not been put on South Australian television so much. Interstate is the market we're going for, but it does project the fact that we are progressive. It does project the fact that there is a lot happening in terms of the way that we live in our community and the sort of state that we offer, and it's being incredibly well received. And I don't think that's the reason why the migration numbers are what they are, but every bit adds up, and brand does matter.
Will Brand SA play a role?
Yeah, and we've re-established Brand SA. I never supported its conclusion, but we've re-established Brand SA, And that gives South Australian businesses, many of which will be represented here today, the opportunity to put the logo on your product, project the confidence, project the pride. And like I said, it's really about ensuring that the rest of the nation, if not the world, looks at South Australia in a different context to where we were 20 years ago, because it is different. It is different. And we shouldn't be shying away from that.
Questions from the floor. There's hands up. Where's our mics? We've only got a few minutes as well. Maybe while the mic's getting there, I'll ask you, you mentioned defence cyber space and what an opportunity off the back of, I guess the government program is behind defence, but cyber and space. Yeah. Can you give any tips to private businesses looking to take advantage of the huge tailwinds of that?
Yeah, so the investment attraction opportunity for South Australia in respect to space and cyber, obviously there's the headquarters, which we know about, but our point of difference is workforce. So when we talk about cyber, let's talk about it in the context of IT generally. I mean, look at what both PwC and Deloitte are doing. They've both tripled the size of their workforce here in South Australia on the ability to be able to attract and retain talent. There's the skilled services hub that PwC has in the city, and then of course what Deloitte are building in the new Walker Corp tower. That is all about having young people with requisite IT and cyber skills offering their services interstate, which they can do perfectly appropriately from the state of South Australia. And when we give young people in our state high quality jobs that are well remunerated, the likelihood of them leaving diminishes dramatically, particularly in comparison to Melbourne and Sydney. So our competitive advantage is staff retention, not paying cheap wages. I don't want to race to the bottom on wages. That is not a point of difference that we want to promote or have, quite the opposite. But retention and reductions in staff turnover represent very substantial real savings. The biggest challenge for any business at the moment is workforce. So around space and cyber, we go to the rest of the country, we go to markets with the requisite skills in an industry base now that is growing, with an opportunity to be able to expand on that because of the quality of the workforce. But that is why universities are so critical, and they're all here today. That's why unis are so fundamentally important in developing that pipeline of workforce. It's also why we want to see a university with a mainstay position, not just in the top 100, but closer to the top 50, hence the new University of the Future program. I want to give a shout out to Adelaide and UniSA that are here now. Between the two Chancellors and Vice-Chancellors, you've got no idea how much work is going on behind the scenes. I am determined to make sure we pull this off. We are going to pull this off, aren't we, Pauline? And Catherine, who's here. We are going to make this happen. And when we do, the new University of the Future is going to be the largest domestic educator of students in the nation. In the nation. And that brings with it a lot of R&D opportunity, let alone ranking opportunity, something that we're working with the Productivity Commission on now. With Adrian Temple and his team. So this is a massive project that people said to me is never going to happen. Well, watch. And it's all related. One thing connects to the other.
Thank you, Prue. I think
Sorry.
we have...
But these are big policy reforms, right? I mean, I don't want to wax lyrical and talk about all these. These are big projects that we are undertaking that, I'm determined to use the political capital that the government has to make these things happen. Whether it be all of the things I mentioned in this speech, of which there were probably too many, given the length of it. But there is an extraordinary amount of opportunity, and we are making active decisions. And I'm unapologetic, forgive me, sorry, in this forum, in CEDA, if people here don't care about these major policy reforms, then I don't know who will. I walk down Rundle Mall, and all they want to bloody talk about is the V8s. I'm hoping this crowd cares, which is great, by the way, we're all for the V8s, but if you hadn't noticed. But these are big changes that if we pull off can make a massive difference. And it's important that people in this room, thought leaders in our state, don't understand what the government is doing, but understand why we're doing it and how it can have a material impact for your business.
selfishly big fan of the new university. We need more international students, jobs, vibrancy, everything that it brings. We do have the last question of the day from the audience.
Thank you. I was sitting here regretting actually putting my hand up, but I will ask the question. With diversity such a forefront in everyone's mind, you mentioned you spoke to elders of the community. I just had a thought as to why we don't have Indigenous language as part of our schooling. If we do, I apologise for asking the question, but we teach so many different languages: Greek, Italian, Chinese, and obviously Indigenous cultural studies. But do you see a place for that language being taught in our primary schools?
There are some schools who do have Indigenous language programs, but not to the extent that we see with other languages, which in many respects is a great shame. The languages that we're talking about, some have the greatest lineage or the longest lineage of any languages we know anywhere in the world, and to be lost would be a source of great shame. I mean, advocacy around policies like that are exactly why the voice is there, mind you. I can't sit here authoritatively and talk to a specific government program where we're making a huge investment in language, but investments in culture we are serious about. And if there are Indigenous communities who feel as though language is not getting the attention it deserves, we're going to hear about it on the floor of Parliament.
Premier, both of my children are learning Ghana language at the moment, so it is trickling through. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for being the figurehead of this wonderful state and what you're achieving. We have Nick Reid, who has been bringing some vibrancy to our city to bring RAA into our great city of Adelaide, where that vibrancy of not just events but also just people working and getting out and about are here. So thanks very much, Nick, for closing us out.
Thank you, Brenton, for the introduction and for facilitating the Q&A with the Premier. And it was fantastic to hear the Premier today. I can assure him that we all care. I particularly enjoyed hearing about our economic purpose in the global context and how we can ensure no one's left behind. I personally really liked the don't rest on our laurels and to double down essentially on ambition. I think that's something that's probably very similar that the way the government's thinking, that how many businesses are also thinking right now. And I can imagine the power of, if we're all doing that at the same time, that quite brilliant set of numbers might look even better in the future. I really liked also the need to get smarter and the workforce development opportunities that the government are thinking about, and something that's very close to our heart at RAA, decarbonisation. We're certainly leading the country, but we do think we can lead the world. Finally, I certainly enjoyed hearing about Northern Water. I certainly think this is a very exciting announcement. I can absolutely vouch for this being probably our single biggest economic driver for growth going forward. I'm super excited to hear it where it's at the moment, so congratulations on that. But events like today, provide an important platform to bring industry, community and political leaders together to discuss the challenges and opportunities facing our state. It's why we're all here, and it's why RAA is here supporting this event and joining the conversation. This year marks our 120th anniversary. I'm a proud South Australian, and it's great to be leading this iconic and trusted organisation and to represent the interests of 2 in every 3 South Australian households. We've come a long way since being founded by a small group of motoring pioneers in 1903 to being the largest member organisation in South Australia, representing 800,000 members. Today we're more focused than ever on being an innovative force to influence and address the issues that matter most to South Australians. It's why we've been more vocal on economic matters like population growth and social issues like the Uluru Statement of the Heart. And it's why we're seeking to play a key role in the climate fight by helping decarbonise our state for a more sustainable future. Just like we solved range anxiety 120 years ago with the introduction of combustion engine vehicles, following a successful competitive tender process, we're rolling out South Australia's first border-to-border electric vehicle charging network with 140 sites in partnership and with the support of the state government. This will help address today's range anxiety, which is due to a lack of that same charging infrastructure, which is a key barrier to the uptake of EVs, or has been. It also sets us on a path to a more sustainable and affordable transport future. We will continue to elevate our voice and make our own investments where we believe we can make a difference. In planning for the future, we may not always agree on the best way forward, but industry and government working together in the best interest of South Australians benefits everyone. And I think that's what we saw today. Again, thank you, Premier, for attending today. And finally, on behalf of everyone, I would like to say thanks to the CEDA team and all the sponsors, Adelaide Airport, University of South Australia, Flinders Port Holdings, and of course, RAA. I'd now like to hand back to Christine Zeitz.
Well, thank you, Nick. We're at time, so it just leaves me to thank our major sponsors once again, RAA, the University of South Australia, and I'm missing someone, Adelaide Airport. And just to introduce, I'm not sure we did it properly, that was Brendan Cox, the Managing Director of Adelaide Airport, and Brendan, you did a great job. And also supporting sponsor Flinders Port Holdings. I just also wanted to acknowledge our Deputy Premier. I didn't welcome her at the beginning and I saw her in the room, so very much welcome Susan Close as well. And I also wanted to just reference the future CEDA events. We do have the Treasurer speaking in July and we have the Minister for Infrastructure speaking in August. And of course, we'd love to see you at those events. So we do want to finish on time. We're right on 2 o'clock. Thank you for attending and thank you, Premier, for your State of the State address.